It is what gives to all the others that which itself it possesses primarily. Is it possible that all teaching fulfills this condition? A music teacher, math teacher, or a language teacher. If that teacher can give to others that which it possesses, would you not agree, no matter how much it gives to the others, the teacher has more than he gives or she gives? No matter how much you give, there's always connections and meanings that you've come to that you can't simply disclose it all, because it may be too obvious for you. Therefore, whatever the teacher gives to others, the teacher itself contains that primarily. Music, dance, cooking, anything. And has it in a more fundamental way, more fundamental way, and necessarily contains it more perfectly. Therefore, from this reasoning, we would say there's a basis for saying mind then exists, and it then gives to souls the various individual aspects of itself, which it possesses more fundamentally and more perfectly, and must exist prior, and must be prior. And we can now reflect and say, now, therefore, all mind has being. I'll put a B next to it, right? As well as the soul that possesses minds. And also all the individual minds possess being. Therefore, there is one thing that permeates it all: being. Now, look here. Notice what we're saying, though. Let's go back to what we're saying. If there is such a thing, if anything exists at all, if there is such a thing as being, and if it's a cause, if it exists in any way, right? If it exists in any way, it must have some power. There must be some activity that proceeds from it. Now, in this activity, there must be something most interesting which we're now going to apply to everything that we were doing. We touched on it a moment ago, and that is the source of its perfection. Do you agree we said the cause of the perfection of that relationship between Mani and Sara must be, in terms of the relationship itself, the degree to which they can actualize that idea they have in themselves, which they voluntarily accept and voluntarily act out, then all their activity is in respect to it, all the power they can have then acts out and flows through them, and therefore they can be said to have a relationship based upon a common broad-based plan and purpose. Well, then, in order to gain that kind of relationship, they must continuously, in one way or the other, intuitively, in one way or the other, always go back and reflect on the source of their own existence, must they not? They have to return to the source of their existence. That's the idea. To the degree then that they can return to the source of their existence, that's also the cause of their existence. And we said that was the final cause. So you know what that means? That means, curiously enough, if being then exists, it must have some power. It must have some activity that proceeds from it. And that activity must be to return to its own origins, for that's the very basis of its perfection. But in that moment of returning, you see, in that very moment of returning, in that moment of returning, see, in that moment of returning, it then, in returning, returns to its source, finds its perfection there, and discovers something quite remarkable. Would you agree that something is interesting about this, and that is that we said before that when they return to the cause of their own existence, which is the final cause, what they really come to is the very idea that started out the entire relationship. In that sense, then, that idea existed potentially there all the time. Therefore, they discover, right, that here is the very idea, the goal of reversion. They discovered in one sense that in this entire development, gaining the power, acting out the activity, that they return to their source and discover that part of themselves never left its source. Mani and Sara, what do they discover as they perfect their relationship? Only one thing: that it was there from the beginning. And now what they've done is actualized it, they've actualized it, and therefore it emerges for them to be